Hi guys, I'm here with an interview with Hersey, who's been playing Yisan the Wandering Bard, and he was playing in the DDMGaming, and he came, believe it or not, top 4 with a mono green deck. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and you're also representing a store, I believe.
Yes, so I am representing Gamer Oasis, which is a game store from Harrisonburg, Virginia, about 5 hours south of the store that they hosted the DDMGaming event at. It was quite the day. Magic from 10 a.m. till 10:30 at night, and then I
That's a
had
long day.
it was a long day, and then I also had a 5.5 hour drive home right
Oh,
after that night. Yeah, I made it home around 3:30 in the morning.
that sounds a little bit scary. You're probably kind of mentally drained, and you got to drive home in a car.
Yeah, it was definitely a little rough. I had my usual riding companion of Sour Patch Kids and
But
made it
on your
along.
drive to the tournament and on your preparation before the tournament, you decided with Yisan the Wandering Bard. And we're going to talk a lot about your build, but first I want to know about why did you go with Yisan? I mean, we're in a Sushi Hulk meta and Tuna
Yeah.
Thrasius.
So people call me crazy.
Yeah.
I love the deck. Yisan is my favorite commander. He is my favorite deck that I've ever piloted, that I have ever built, that I have ever built around. I decided to take Yisan into the meta because I wanted to prove to people
Mhm.
that a tier 2 deck can make the cut if its pilot is good enough. Because they just recently moved Yisan from the commander tier list down from tier 1 to tier 2 a couple months ago. And that was a long running gag at my LGS that I'm now just stuck playing tier 2. And I wanted to prove to people that he can still make it, that Yisan can still play with the big boys. And
Yeah.
I feel like I did that pretty well.
Mhm.
Is people consider him to be a beginner deck, and
Yes,
that is just
definitely.
not the truth at all. It is very
I
far from the
have to
truth.
admit that I still recommend Yisan as a beginner deck. But
And that's something that I actually very strongly disagree
mhm,
with, because Yisan plays more along the lines of a mono blue commander than he does a mono green commander.
I will agree with that.
Um, when you sit down at a table with Yisan, in order for you to play him to the level of competitive ability that other decks have, the pilot has to know and understand not only everything going on within their deck, but also every other deck at the table. They have to know each deck just as well, if not better, than they know their own deck when you're piloting a commander like Yisan, a toolbox like Yisan, where depending on what verse you're on, your hand size can go from anywhere, 15 cards more in your hand because it's on the table. So people suggesting Yisan as a beginner commander kind of puts a lot of people off of him in the first place, because he is very, very, very difficult to do well with in the beginning. He plays a certain amount of stacks packages and has so many different toolbox options that when you're first starting out and you give somebody a Yisan list, it's a very daunting task. And many people that I've talked to who tried to play Yisan because they were beginners or they thought he was pretty good, they gave him a 2 week trial period and
Oh,
they
yeah.
couldn't get behind him. And so they played some games for a couple of weeks, realized that, he sucks. So they stopped playing him, and they never
Oh,
gave him the chance to really show what he can do in the right hands. You have to develop a skill ceiling. He has a very high ceiling, and also a pretty high floor. So it's difficult to get into the format with him.
now I suddenly feel a little bit guilty. Yeah, I guess you might have proven me wrong. But how about the budget, on the other hand? He is something you could actually accumulate on a budget, so he's a good beginner when it comes to that, right? Or do you disagree?
Yeah, so Yisan on a budget functions very well. I think Yisan and the Frog are two decks that can get away with budget decks pretty well. We're actually discussing it on the Yisan Discord right now,
Hmm.
how good Yisan can be at a $100 budget, a $200 budget, a $500 budget. And Yisan can be an introductory level deck in the form of money.
Hmm.
If you have to play with a no proxy list, then you can invest $500 in Yisan and have a very good, very efficient deck because he is a tutor in the command zone,
Yes.
which is just super powerful. So I love the budgetary options of Yisan, and I highly encourage people to explore the whole range of the spectrum with him. And even at the top end, he's only 16 or $1,800 at most.
So that would be the kind of the best Yisan you could put together, 1,600 or something, the most in dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my list is currently sitting at around $1,650,
Hmm. Hmm.
and a third of that entire price comes from Gaia's Cradle and Mana Crypt.
Yeah, those are expensive.
And yeah, those are pricey cards, but the rest of the list, you're playing so many creatures that are just 25 cent, $2, $3 creatures that
Yeah,
are all stars in the list.
a lot of common and
Um,
uncommon cards, I believe.
yeah, a ton of just random commons and uncommons. You're playing every mana dork that you can possibly play
Yeah.
in the list. So he does function very, very well on a budget.
So let's talk about your Yisan deck. How has Yisan developed for you? I mean, Yisan has existed for a long time now. He's been a competitive commander for so many years, but he's gotten a lot of upgrades. And where do you think your Yisan deck and where do you think Yisan is going?
Uh,
We have only hard
Yisan,
questions here.
yeah, Yisan currently in the meta
Hmm.
is not going great places. He has not gotten some real all-star cards from the past few sets. I mean, other than every deck that has the option to play Veil of Summer now. And I really like Castle Garenbrig from from Throne of Eldraine. I've used that land a lot, and I really stand by it. But he hasn't gotten a lot of significant upgrades in recent set releases, and so he's kind of gotten pushed aside just because he has not been able to keep up with
Hmm.
that constant upgradable status like other lists have.
Yeah, there's a lot of lists that have gotten a lot of upgrades. That is very true. That is very
I
true.
mean, the second that Theros Beyond Death came out, nice little 2 blue sushi piece came out, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, a bunch of decks became insanely better. Yisan hasn't really had that option recently. I'm very much looking forward to Ikoria, the
Hmm.
next set release that we have coming up in April. I'm really hoping that we might be able to pull 1 or 2 all stars out of that because the theme that the set is going for. But lately, Yisan has mostly had to adapt not through new cards but different configurations.
Hmm.
I'm doing some things in my list that a lot of people just outright did not like. A lot of people thought that I was just wrong, outright wrong for playing them. One of the primary examples is
Hmm.
I'm playing 31 lands.
I think I played a little
And
bit more when I did it.
yes, most lists run 33 at the least, and
Hmm.
some have even broken into running 35 to
I
36.
think I was on 34 when I played Yisan.
Yeah, 34 is the average
Hmm.
for most Yisan lists, and that's because you want to have that density of lands to keep playing throughout the first 5 turns. Should you have to play through a board wipe, because the majority of your other mana sources are mana dorks that are going to get destroyed by that board wipe.
Hmm.
Uh, I went down to 31 lands because it is a competitive EDH deck, and you want to be drawing constant gas. There are more options available to you in mana, and if you have to fight through a board wipe, then yes, your commander is going to cost 5, but I want to be able to have impactful spells to cast during that interim after the board wipe. And also going into the Sushi Hulk meta, there is just less individual targeted removal to worry about. People don't run as much because hitting Sushi with Slaughter Pact doesn't do anything. Either they still win the game if they don't have any cards in their library.
What more weapons did you bring to with your Yisan to this tournament?
So I did have a few cards that I wanted to slot in specifically because I knew I'd be going up against a decent amount of Fish Hulk. One of the primary ones that is definitely pretty popular and very much used against Flash is the Ravenous Slime. Ravenous Slime is a 3-mana 1/1 that essentially allows you to stop Hulk from getting its trigger. And I knew that I wanted to put Ravenous Slime into the list very, very early on. And so I started playing with Ravenous Slime in the list. And I wanted to see realistically when the fastest I could get the slime out. And Yisan can get the slime out to stop the Hulk player usually around turn 4 or turn 5 on average. Turn 4 with a double, with an untapper, and turn 5 just naturally, which I thought was pretty okay. There's the turn 2 dream, it exists. The turn 1 dream, it exists, but it's still pretty hard to get.
You could also draw the Ravenous Slime, just cast it.
Right, and just casting the Ravenous Slime definitely does things because it makes the Hulk player have to get rid of the slime.
Yeah.
In order to go off underneath of it. One of the things that I brought that surprised a lot of people and that nobody saw coming, Shaper Savant himself just commented about the absurdity of the card, and he loved it. And my mate, actually, one of my primary goals during that day was to make a Fish Hulk player lose the game using this card.
Okay, now I'm
it is
interested.
it is a 4-mana 2/2 called Selvala's Enforcer.
Okay, what does it do?
Which you've probably never heard of. It's a random common from Conspiracy 1. It has a parlay ability. When it enters the battlefield, each player reveals the top card of his or her library. For each non-land card revealed this way, you put a 1/1 counter on Selvala's Enforcer. Then each player draws a card.
Nice.
Yeah, so I sadly didn't get any of the Fish players with that card during that day, but I still run it in my list when I play competitively online because it's just a card that nobody expects. And
no, you would definitely surprise every Sushi player with that.
Yeah, and I also really like it because it is the true last line of defense. Yes. You can let your opponents have their counterspell war on top of you sitting on a verse 2 with 6 mana and Aquarian Ranger. Everybody's forgotten
care about
you.
Yisan.
Right. Nobody's going to expect it. Somebody hard casts the Fish, holds priority on the ETB and cast Consultation. People try and counter. Consultation resolves. Most people start to try and pick up their cards. And that's where the legendary words of In Response come into play.
From a mono green deck.
Right. And that's why I wanted to play Yisan. I wanted to be a mono green player with the power to say In Response. And you just verse up that Selvala's Enforcer and make the Fish player lose the game with their win the game trigger on the stack.
That's beautiful. I have something similar in my cEDH deck. It's a legendary land that you can fetch that will tap and each player draws a card.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And that's cards like Cephalid Coliseum just got insanely good in the meta.
I would definitely have played that one instead if it was legendary, but it is not legendary.
Right.
So CC.
Yeah. And that's also the interesting thing about Cephalid is that previously it was used to just win the game for yourself, and now it's primarily used to make an opponent lose the game.
Yes, it's also a good card in general.
It's also just a great card, but I've noticed it's actually hard to hit that threshold against a Flash Hulk deck.
Early in the game.
Like because the time when a Flash Hulk is trying to win,
It's very
7
hard
cards
to.
is rough to hit.
But the thing is that early in the game, probably have a lot of counter spells, and it's probably trickier to go off and win. Later in the game, when the people have been casting their counter spells and the counter spell will have been played out, then you have your
Sephiroth
threshold. So,
gets great.
yeah, so it's a later stage control card.
Another thing that I chose to play that a lot of people were very curious about was I had the 31 land count, which is mostly pretty low for a Yisan list. And I had 2 lands specifically, one of which is Blast Zone,
Oh,
which
what do you do with?
I actually replaced Mouth of Ronom with Blast Zone in my list. Uh, Most people were very curious about that.
I'm very curious about that.
I like Blast Zone as a blanket removal piece. If things go very poorly, or if I need to get rid of a curse totem, it's just another way of like Mouth of Ronom can't get
Yeah,
rid of a curse totem for me. And a lot of people argue that it's a non-bow because it blows up, my own mana dorks on 1 or my own collector oof on 2. But if there's something that I'm willing to sacrifice that blast zone for, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. If I
yeah.
can get it up to Linvala counters and blow up a Linvala Keeper of Silence with it, that's great. Mouth of Ronom can also do that, but blast zone is just it hits more things,
Yeah,
and it makes your opponents play very safely, and
yeah.
they're actually wary of the blast zone. It's a card that carries more weight than most people expect.
I think the 2 creatures that Yisan really hates is Aven Mind Sensor and Linvala Keeper of Silence. Those are the creatures you
Right,
need to kill. So
right, and
that's where you
blast
have Mouth of
zone,
Ronom.
right, and that's what Mouth of Ronom is primarily used for. Mouth of Ronom doesn't hit,
Anything
sushi
else?
anymore
No.
because sushi wins whether the creature is there or not. And it used to hit Labman really well,
Yeah,
but Labman's not seeing as much play anymore. It's not the primary line. And I wanted essentially just another piece of interaction that was practically free that
I
I
think
could build up and
some
make modal.
I think some sushi decks still plays Jace Wielder of Mysteries, and Blast Zone
Yes,
actually blasts that thing apart, and that
right.
actually stops the combo, so that works. I want to ask you about a card that I consider
Okay.
like one of my favorite cards for Yisan the Wandering Bard, Warping Whale.
Warping Whale. What does Warping Whale do?
It is a colorless instant actually, so you have to have some colorless mana, but it has
Right.
3 options. You can counter target sorcery, that is Toxic Deluge. You can create a 1/1 that you can sacrifice for a mana. We don't really like that ability. But the secondary ability is exile target creature with toughness or power of 1. This will hit Aven Mind Sensor. And Aven Mind Sensor and Toxic Deluge are 2 of the main big problems for Yisan. And I thought this card had a lot of diversity against those problems. Or what do you think about it?
I mean, any counterspell that we can play in the color green is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I definitely countering a deluge is kind of like the Spanish Inquisition. No one's going to expect it
No.
out of the mono green player. Um, I think that the 1 and a specific colorless pip might be a little hard at times to achieve. It's definitely a fun little pocket pick that I think can just get some people. I don't know if I'd play it in my 99 just because it seems very, very specific. But it's definitely something that I'd be more than interested in trying out just to see how it goes. I just never seen that before. It's very interesting.
Are there any other spicy cards in your list?
Yeah, there's definitely something that I'm playing that I got a lot of flack for. And that is Beseju, Who Shelters All.
I agree
It
with you.
is
It's
it
good.
is a it is a fantastic card. It is a
Yes.
fantastic card, but we are a deck that is playing a whopping 4 sorceries and 9 instants, and out of those, most of them, a decent amount of them, don't even have colorless pips to pay. It's also a land that enters tapped, guaranteed, has to enter tapped. It's the only land in the list that has to enter tapped. It is one of the 2 that has an enters tapped clause with Castle Garenbrig. It's a fantastic card.
Mhm.
and it is another one of those cards that I chose to test. And I advise playing it only in blind metas that you know there's going to be a lot of counterspell interaction. The primary reason why I play Beseju, who shelters all, is because an uncounterable Seedborn Use tutor can win you the game. Guaranteed. Uncounterable tutors in general
That is
are.
Green Sun Senate and Final of Devastation.
There's a number
Calling?
of them. You can Court of Calling, Green Sun Zenith, Finale of Devastation, Natural Order.
Oh yeah, Natural Order.
Natural Order you can use it with. An Uncounterable Beast Within
That is
can be
actually
really good. And people don't expect that kind of stuff out of the mono green list. But a very fast Seedborn Muse, a turn 3 Seedborn Muse with a Natural Order can just be an insanely powerful play that'll win you the game the next time.
But
around.
how does your deck actually win currently? Because Yisan can actually win through a lot of different ways. For example, he could use Great Roof Behemoth, or he could do the Tamer Sabertooth Wirewood Symbiote, or there's some other cool stuff. But how do you do it?
It really depends on the game. There's a number of that we have in the list. The most popular and the primary win con is versing up to 8 with Yissan, getting Crater Hoof Behemoth with a critical mass of creatures on the battlefield. Usually you want at least 6 to 10 creatures on the battlefield when you Crater Hoof. It can definitely be less. It can be more depending on when the game is. But you slam Crater Hoof and you beat each opponent in the face during combat. Because it turns out people don't have a lot of fog effects in competitive EDH. People don't have a lot of blockers that are very big in competitive EDH.
They get trampled from the native, so it's not gonna matter.
Yes, and they also get trampled from Crater Hoof. And so the primary way that your deck likes to win is using verses 1 through 7 to kind of control the game out or accelerate your game plan until you can hit a verse 8 and win the game during combat. That's the primary way that you like to do it. There are a couple of ways that you can quick and easy shortcut to that. The main one that we use is a Tamer Sabertooth loop with Wirewood Symbiote. So you have Sabertooth, Wirewood Symbiote, and some other elf on the battlefield. And then typically you do it with Karametra's Acolyte. And I'll speak actually here on what we call the double 4. In Yissan, if there is no real reason to grab a 3-drop and you're in a safe position, maybe with the Sylvan Safekeeper out, then we like to do what we call double 4ing, which is where you verse onto 3, holding priority and activating either Quirion Ranger or Squib Ranger to untap Yisan and verse onto 4. And the way that Yisan is worded, putting a verse counter on him is part of the cost. So when those 2 triggers that you stacked up resolve, they both are on verse 4. So you get to grab 2 4-drops instead of a 3-drop and a 4-drop.
Which gives you Tamer, Sabertooth, and Karametra's Acolyte.
And Karametra's Acolyte, right. And if you can do that on somebody's end step, then you untap, and you can either verse up to 6, using the exact same method. You double verse to 6, grab a Woodland Bellower, which gets you Wirewood Symbiote from your library. Or if you already have a Wirewood Symbiote or something along those lines in your hand, or another creature tutor, then you just grab Wirewood Symbiote. And you use a loop where you float at least minimum of
5
mana. Yeah. 5 mana from Karametra's Acolyte, which is pretty easy. Tamer Sabertooth is 2 pips, Yisan is a pip, Karametra's Acolyte is a pip, and Wirewood Symbiote is another one. So those cards themselves gives you the mana that you need for it. And you use Wirewood Symbiote to return an elf you control to your hand, to its owner's hand, and untap target creature. So you untap your Karametra's Acolyte. And then you have 5 mana floating. You use 2 of it to return the Wirewood Symbiote to your hand, 1 of it to replay the elf that you bounced, and 1 of it to replay the Wirewood Symbiote. And because of the rules of Magic, even though Symbiote says activate this ability only once each turn, it sees it as a new Wirewood Symbiote. So you can do that again. And that nets you 1 mana every time. And so that is a way to generate an infinite amount of mana and also tap and untap a creature any number of times, which Yisan very much likes to do. So if you have that combo assembled, which sounds very convoluted, and it's a lot of pieces, but your deck is a tutor deck. It is a lot easier to assemble that combo than you think it would be.
I think this combo is consistently assembled turn 5 or so.
Yeah, barring interaction, you can. Yeah, if you're goldfishing, you're getting it out turn 5 or turn 4 if things are really going your way. But typically,
it's never going your way.
Yeah, it's never going your way. You're going to have to use your verse 3 to grab a Ravenous Slime, or use your verse 4 to grab a Thought Not Seer.
Yes.
And that's when you verse onto your 5, and you grab Seedborn Muse, which is, I believe, the most powerful card in the deck. Seedborn Muse allows you to verse at least once on each player's turn, and sometimes multiple times on each player's turn. So if you have gotten Yisan all the way up to verse 5, then you just go around the table. Verse 6, you grab a Woodland Bellower, a Bane of Progress, or a Great Oak Guardian if you play it. Verse 7, you grab your Regal Force, and then you wait until your turn, and then grab your verse 8, slam it, win the game.
Yes.
Which is super fun to do. And that also lets you grab verse 6 for a Woodland Bellower to grab Sylvan Safekeeper and give your Seedborn Muse protection or your Yisan protection if need be. That is actually how most games typically go. You use verses 1 through 4 to answer your opponent's threats. And then
5,
at 5, you get that Seedborn Muse, and that's when your opponents need to be worried, and they need to figure out how to get off the board.
This is how we figure out how to defeat the Yisan player as well.
So Yisan is almost more of a politician's deck than you would expect to see in cEDH.
When you say a politicianer's deck, how would you define and describe that?
So Yisan, one of the things that I like to say in my local meta is that I don't lie, but I will tell you the truth that I want you to hear.
That is something I do as well, actually.
Yeah, like you want your opponents to hate each other more than they hate you.
Yes.
And so Yisan likes very much to play around that, and then he is the last ditch effort to stop somebody from going off. You have the answers on that verse, or you're thinking, okay, if this happens, I can double verse to my 4 and grab Thought Not Seer to stop the flash player from flash hulking. But you don't want to do that immediately. You want to
let your other opponents handle it for you.
Right. You want to stay back and encourage other opponents. You know, you'll definitely see me at tables pointing out things that other players have let kind of slide off and are just kind of sitting there. You'll see me go like, okay, hey, by the way, this person has drawn 8 cards off of that Ristic Study in the course of 2 turns. We have to be wary of this. And I'll start pointing out things and letting people know that there are threats that need to be dealt with at a table, while also not letting them know that I'm one of those threats. Now that I'm saying this, anybody watching it is definitely going to target me for that, but it's just how it goes.
This is actually the same way that I play as well. I want to point out to my opponents, like, okay, that guy over there, he is the threat, and we should worry about him. Don't worry about me, I'm safe. But I truly believe that no matter what form of multiplayer free-for-all game you play, and EDH is a multiplayer free-for-all game, you always want one of your opponents to spend their resources dealing with another one of your opponents.
Absolutely. And I don't necessarily consider some of the stuff that I do to be outright politics. Politics in cEDH is based off of threat assessment. What I do is make threat assessment and make them vocal. Most players like to keep some of that information to themselves and let their opponents, wonder about what's going to happen and play fearfully. I like to let those threats be well known so that people are playing fearfully, but also with an open mind about what's going on around the table that's not sitting at them on a green
Do
table.
you mean that you're mentioning what your opponents could do? For example, the guitar player
Yes.
could be winning very soon.
Right. I'll make comments based off of the game knowledge that I have and the understanding that I have of a specific deck and the probabilities, the math that I'm doing in my head, and I'll let my opponents know what those probabilities are, what the probability of them having that win, or what based off of this play, what could they be sandbagging in their hand. And politics and cEDH, they exist, but they are not what you consider to be commander politics. It's not like,
No.
hey, you and me, we're not going to let that player hit us for the next 2 turns, and then we'll not hit them in return, and we'll only hit this guy. It's nothing like that. Politics
Yeah,
exists on the stack.
you could basically say that the casual politics is a lot more fun politics. Like,
Right.
let's do this together, bro, and fist pump. While in the competitive EDH, it's like, okay, buddy, we have a problem together. That cursed totem is locking both of us down. So, could you help me deal with that in some form of way?
I mean, I sometimes don't even take it that far of like, can you help me deal with that? I just make it known that that player and I both do not like that card being on the table. I'm not trying to get somebody to shake hands with me and be like, yeah, I'll take care of it, or yes, I'll take care of it. I just let it be known, and let it be known that I'm open to having that thing removed by either one of us. I'm not trying to specifically cut deals with people in any way, shape, or form. I'm just assessing the threats on the board and making them known.
I understand. It's more like sitting back and just pointing out problems, kind of politics. It doesn't really sound like politics. It just sounds like someone who's trying to be aware of the game, actually.
Yeah, and that's the majority of what I go for, is just that game awareness and that game knowledge. And I do my best to use that game knowledge to my advantage and let my opponents kind of work around it.
We are talking a lot about game knowledge right now, and I agree with you that game knowledge is probably one of the best things you want to achieve if you want to be a good player, because you need to have a lot of knowledge about all kinds of different decks. And in my opinion, playing those decks are usually the best way of achieving that knowledge, because just playing, let's say, only Yisan and just playing against all different variations of decks aren't gonna gain you enough knowledge, because you actually need to sit there and play the Kess Storm so you get a feeling of how Kess Storm functions and flows. Or do you have any
And
other sorry?
and then like going through those, when the best time to interact with a deck that's going off is, can typically only be gained and understood by going off with that deck and learning when you don't want somebody to stop you.
Exactly. So it sounds more like if you're gonna play Yisan, you should play a lot of other decks before Yisan.
Yes. I developed my opinion of don't make Yisan a starter deck because Yisan was my introduction to cEDH.
Oh.
I was that player who, when I was first starting out, I slammed a 3-ball down because I thought it was going to be great for me, and then I let the flash hole player win underneath of it. That kind of thing. And
the hard way.
I learned the hard way. I learned through smashing my head into complete and utter failure over and over and over again until I figured out what was going wrong. And I fixed it and resolved it within myself. And I play a lot of games against a lot of different decks. And I always make my opponents show me how they win. I always want to see you walk through your win con so that I can understand it better, so I can get that little piece of knowledge, so I can see if there is a new piece of tech that you're playing that maybe would get revealed off of you having to flip things off the top for Urza. I'm not saying that I make the Urza player go through every single card,
no.
But I do make them show me their win con and their protection.
So you take every opportunity possible to gain more knowledge and become a better player, even when you're losing, so that next time you play against Urza, you're gonna have more knowledge about him.
Right. I take every chance that I get to just study and understand the decks. I have looked up every single top primer and even some of the ones that aren't top primers on
Wow.
every single deck in the top tier. And I have studied the 99 and I have studied their maybe board and I've read through all of their uh, descriptions of the decks and how the deck likes to win. I've read through the Frogs primer 4 times because God, I deck is complicated.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
but I learn and I study and I read and I try and understand these lists and how they play and how they perform. And then I play against them and I see that stuff put into action and it clicks in my head about, oh, I read this
Yeah.
from that primer. This is what they want to do next.
You know what I'm hearing? Everyone who's listening to this is the voice from someone who has been becoming a really good player and reached top 4. This is what you should do to become a really good cEDH player. Study, learn, and develop and get better.
Right.
Really good
And
advice, I have to say.
yeah, and Tapped Out is, and now Moxfield is a new one that's coming up, are great resources.
Mhm.
The top 4 decks are currently on Moxfield. Mike from DDM, the guy who ran it, put our
Mhm.
top 4 lists on the Moxfield. And immediately after all those were up there, I studied that Tatiova list because it looked amazing. And he piloted that deck super, super well.
Mhm.
And it was really, really just fun to play against. I enjoyed losing to the deck, which is really cool. And I wanted to study and understand it so I could know to play it better. And now I know don't let a Sapphire Diamond resolve or Sapphire Medallion resolve against a Tatiova player because that's just how they win the game. So things like that, I learn from my mistakes. I love to make mistakes because it's another learning opportunity that I get.
And don't mind losing the game.
Don't ever mind losing the game. Saltiness is something that people have, and I do my best to internalize it as best I can. I'm the first to say that I'll get upset over certain losses, but I will never let them deter me from playing a deck. I'll never let them deter me from playing the game, and that's why I stuck with Yisan. That's why I pushed through that first, 2 and 3 month slog of playing Yisan against these really, really good decks and losing all of them because I wanted to figure out what I could have done different and how I lost and how I could have won.
It sounds like you've accepted a challenge. So you stated early in the video that Yisan isn't that strong, but you're still playing it, trying to let's do it anyway.
Yeah, it really is just a challenge that I
Yeah.
love to undertake.
There's a lot of really good advice here in general. This video was supposed to be about Yisan the Wandering Bard, yet we're talking a lot about how to be a good player. Still good. I want to ask you, playing and piloting your Yisan deck throughout the tournament, how was your games going, and why did you end up in the top 4? Oh,
That's a
those of
great
you that
question.
don't know, it was 58 players with a huge variety of different decks, and there were a lot of representation from Sur, Sushi Hulk, Gitrog Monsters. They had a lot of varieties. So there were a lot of top-end Tier 1 decks at the place, actually.
Yes, I played against a tier 1 deck in at least 1 or 2 in every single pod that I played against, except for, ironically enough, my top 16 split. I guess, and my top 4 split because the final
Yeah,
4 was crazy.
we're gonna get to the final 4 pretty soon.
Yeah, and I think that whole day for me was it was very practiced. I never got surprised by anything. I always felt relatively in control, except for my game 2, where I got Toxic Deluged on turn 3 and stuck on 2 lands for the rest of the game underneath of some other player's Trinisphere. That wasn't a good game. We're going to move on from that one. The whole day felt very smooth piloting the deck, and that's because I had just played so many games leading up to it. I had prepared so hard for the event, only playing Yissan against multitudes of configurations of decks, playing over online Discord servers constantly. And I felt really good the day of. And I think that the main thing that landed me in that top 4 spot was my ability to look at a table and see what needed to be done when. It wasn't it wasn't the 99 that I was piloting. It definitely wasn't the commander that I was playing. I believe that the thing that got me to that top 4
Was
was
you?
my understanding of the deck and my understanding of the format. I think that the reason why the top 4 was what it was is because every one of those players loved their decks, knew their decks inside and out, and knew how those decks functioned at a pod of 4.
If you've been watching a previous video where we're talking about with Michael, who played a Yissan crowned Walking Ballista deck, you might have already heard about the top 4, but let's reveal the top 4 in this video as well. So,
Yeah,
what were you
so
going up against? Because this
the
is really
top
funny.
4, the top 4 of that event was a Heliod Sun Crown Mono White,
Yeah.
Una Queen of the Fae Blue Black, Yisan the Wanderer Bard Mono Green, Tatiova the Benthic Druid Blue Green.
I did not expect that. When I
No one expected
no one
that.
expected that, yeah.
No one going into that tournament expected
That.
any of those decks in the top 4.
Why you didn't win the tournament?
Right.
What happened for you? What crushed you, so to say?
Well, one card, Grafdigger's Cage, crushed
Yeah,
me.
that shuts down Yisan.
Yeah, and like I said, Yissan has a toolbox. Yissan is prepared and ready to answer things like Grafdigger's Cage. And while typically you like to answer them by versing and looking through your deck and getting the answer, you can't do that with something like a Grafdigger's Cage. So we play a high density of cards that can answer a Grafdigger's Cage. Things like Cossack Caterpillar, Reclamation Sage, Nature's Claim, Beast Within, Force of Vigor, all sorts of things that you can natural draw into that can answer that Grafdigger's Cage. And essentially what happened is the Heliod player kept an opening hand with 0 white mana source in it, but he had a Chrome Mox. So he led on a colorless land and a Chrome Mox and slammed a turn 1 Grafdigger's Cage. Which, it's rough. I've played against it before. I'm definitely going to play against it again.
It's a really good card in the current meta, as Flashhawk is a really good card in the current meta.
It is a fantastic 1 mana stacks piece in the current meta. Yissan would love to play it, except that Yissan's definitely never going to play it. So I proceeded to go with a turn 1 Root Maze because I wanted that game to slow down, because I knew that Tatiova list could get a value engine going much faster than any of the other decks at the table. And I was most worried about that. And I had a Sylvan Library in hand. So I felt confident that I could find an answer to the Grafdigger's Cage in time for it to be relevant.
Yeah, you're going to draw cards with your Sylvan Library and eventually find one of those cards you mentioned.
Right. And I think I saw somewhere along the lines of like 18 or 21 cards off of that Sylvan Library. And I did not find a single answer to the Grafdigger's Cage. Throughout a fifth of my deck. So, little unfortunate there, but sometimes it just happens.
Yeah, every game isn't your game. It's sad that it was the top 4 final game that could have won you the entire thing, but that happens.
It definitely was a bummer overall, but I still loved that game. I loved playing with the other players who were at that top 4 table, because each one of us was honestly just happy to be there.
Mm-hmm. I guess no one of you actually expected to be there.
Absolutely, none of us expected to be there, and we all kind of just sat around and for a while before we started the game, we were all just marveling at the fact that was the top 4. It was crazy. I mean, we all took pictures of our commanders set up in the corners because we figured no one would believe us that was the top 4 at this very populated event. But each of those folks that we played against, they were great pilots and they understood their decks very well. And I think none of us went home feeling bad about losing that game at all. It was a good game. We had fun, and it was also still very competitive.
Michael definitely agreed with you in the previous interview about Heliod Sun Crown on that point. I have a spoiler here. So I actually know how the game ended because I've heard it from Michael. And one thing you mentioned throughout the entire your pathway through the tournament was that everything was you had planned and organized against all of your opponents. You know what you were gonna do against the sushi decks. You knew what you were gonna do against the Storm Kess, and you knew what you're gonna do against all of the others.
Right.
Then you go up in the top 4 that doesn't include all of those guys, and when the Tatyova player who wins the game puts intuition on the stack, I heard there was a lot of debate between what he found, and you guys couldn't figure it out. So would you like to explain what happened there?
Yeah, that was a weird intuition. Come to find out, spoiler alert, at the end of the day, it didn't matter because he just had a Noxus Revival, so he was going to get whatever he wanted to get anyways.
Yes.
But he found he found a Cyclonic Rift. I think it was another bounce spell.
No, it was a Ghostly Flicker.
Oh, it was Ghostly Flicker. Yes, his win con.
Yeah.
He found a Psych Rift, the Ghostly Flicker, and a Polluted Delta.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened. I think, honestly, the other three of us, the Una, the Heliod, and I, were just very confused.
Yes.
As to what was going on. And we knew that he wanted the Psych Rift because he had the mana to cast it, and he wanted to get the stacks pieces that were stopping him from going off the board. So we knew we weren't going to give him the Psych Rift. The Ghostly Flicker, I don't know why none of us saw it. It was my lack of knowledge of that deck was just it was rough. And then the land, and we debated for, I would say, 5 minutes.
That's a long debate.
To just give the guy a land at the end of the day. Because it's a lands deck, you don't know what he's gonna. That's 2 draw triggers with that Polluted Delta in a Tatyova deck. And I had the Tatyova turned into an elk off of a Kenra's transformation at the time. So we knew he guaranteed wanted that Psych Rift because he wanted to turn his commander back on. So we gave him the land, and come to find out, it didn't matter because he end of turn just Noxious Revival the card that he needed back on top.
Yeah.
But yeah, we debated for 5 minutes over giving a competitive EDH deck a land, and that was a highlight. That was a highlight for sure. That was a good time.
But I have a feeling, because when all of you 4 entered this tournament with a lot of preparations against the competitive tier 1 decks.
Right.
And in the top 4, you were going up against things you hadn't prepared against. So you were basically in the blind suddenly. And what I'm starting to have a feeling of is what wins you is being prepared. Know about your opponent. And when you don't know, that's when you might lose. Because what I truly believe here is that all of those tier 1 decks, they had no idea what Yisan was gonna do. Or maybe they did.
Right. And people knew Yisan because Yisan had his people understood what he was doing. But yeah, a lot of the top 4, those of us, we kind of, I think, got there because we just understood our decks very well. Mm-hmm. I talked to a decent amount of people at that event who just wanted to play Thrasios and Tymna because the best way to combat Fish Hulk is with Fish Hulk. But they had only been playing the deck for 2 months. And so they didn't really have that full-on encompassing knowledge of how their deck fits into all of these different situations that can exist. Mm-hmm. And the Heliod player, Michael, he only played mono white, right? Yeah. He's a mono white player. He spoke about that in your last video. And the Una player said that Una was he'd been playing Una for years. It was how he got into the format, and he just wanted to play his favorite deck. Same with the Tatyova player. He loved that deck. And I loved Yisan. Yisan was how I got into the format. And we made it to that top 4 spot because we just understood our decks, I think, incredibly well. And we understood how we fit into the meta.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think that kind of wraps it up. I think we should end the video with mentioning the tournament in May.
In May, and
are you gonna be
yes,
there?
I sadly am not because I'm working.
Yeah.
My coworker is going to be there with a whole group of people from Gamer Oasis. They're all going to be wearing white shirts. I'm going to tell people to say hi if they see them. But I also mention that Gamer Oasis themselves will be having a cEDH proxy friendly. Oh, we didn't talk about proxies. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that or not.
I think the video is getting a little bit too long. And it shouldn't be about too many things. If the video was shorter, we could have talked about proxies. But we could mention this, that you're having a tournament, and there's a tournament, DGM, in May. And then
in May at the Bearded Dragon in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And then our tournament is in the fourth quarter of this year, and it's coming up around when Commander Legends releases. And it will be a proxy-friendly tournament.
Awesome. So let's go with first mentioning in that case the Bearded Dragon in New Jersey. Then go with your tournament, and then we say, awesome. Thanks for having you here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, I think that wraps it up. But there are more tournaments coming. So what I've heard is that DDM are gonna have. Sorry,
it froze on me. I just got back.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
All right, I think that wraps it up. But there are more tournaments actually coming. So DDMGaming are gonna have a new tournament at the Bearded Dragon in New Jersey in May the 2nd. Links in the description below the video. But you've also gonna have a tournament in your store, if I'm correct.
Yes, Gamer Oasis will be having a tournament, cEDH proxy-friendly tournament on sometime in the fourth quarter of this year around the release of Commander Legends. That's something that we have been working to get set up and established. We're definitely going to be sending word out across all of the networks that we possibly can when we get that locked in. We're working on actually getting it set up with some of the guys from the Playing with Power YouTube channel, seeing if some of them can make it down. And we're looking to try and make that event as large as we possibly can. So we'll definitely be getting channels out about that soon.
Is there any information that is set in stone? Are there any entry fee? Are there any prizes?
We're still kind of up in the air about prize support. We just got information from Wizards of the Coast about how to run the event as proxy friendly, so we can't use any Wizards of the Coast material in any way, shape, or form for prize support. So we're still kind of working on prize support. We're most likely it's going to be just cold hard cash. That's what we're currently working towards. And all of that event entry and everything will be coming out on channels sometime within a month.
All the information about that is also in the description below this video. But then again, cash is king. I have to say, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Hersey?
Hersey.
I'm amazing.
Hersey. Nice. And you're Mons, right?
I'm Mons.
Mons.
Yeah. Hersey, thank you for having us. You're the host now.
Okay, cool.
Hersey, thank you for coming to the channel and sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming and letting me talk about Commander, who I love and super near and dear to my heart. I love the talk. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Oh, I hope definitely. Hope you win the next tournament and we can do this again.
That will be exciting. Bring Yissan to a top 4 2 times in a row.
Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do, feel free to share my videos or even checking out my Patreon page. Also, purchasing cards from the TCG Players website using the affiliate link down below will also help this channel grow. So a big thank you to all of you.